Welcome to another episode of the Dre and Smiley The Inner Circle Podcast.
Smiley, man, I'm trying to contain my excitement, right? So, back like she never left, we have another guest on the podcast who was on our podcast not too long ago. This particular guest she, in my mind, reminds me of like everybody's auntie, everybody's big sister, everybody's cool ass friend. And this is all what I've gathered from her social media content from the last time she's on the podcast. Her social media is focused around helping others kind of heal, evolve, move forward, etc. The topics that she discusses on social media include things like letting yourself grieve, understanding your value, stop rehearsing your suffering, winning the game of life, and so on and so on. This guest is one that she's a doctor, as I mentioned a moment ago, and I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna confess, Smiley, that on social media, on occasion, I interact with her, like great post, love that type of thing. I get so nervous because I feel like my grammar, like she's gonna like check me for putting a comma in the wrong place, putting a apostrophe in the wrong place. So she brings me a little anxiety on occasion when I interact with her. Well, without further ado, Dr. Shanté, welcome back to the podcast.
That is hilarious. I am not the grammar police, okay? As soon as I tell people that I'm an English professor, people are like, oh.
Yeah.
And they immediately think like, do I know the difference between a semicolon and a comma? Like,
right.
It is not that type of party. I appreciate your engagement and enduring support. Truly, I do.
All right. Well, thank you for putting me at ease there. And I appreciate that. So last time you were on the podcast, you shared a lot, in terms of what you've done or doing as it relates to being a speaker educator, being a keynote speaker, being a wellness advocate, and your sincere passion with dance. Anyone who's seen your posts on social media know that you really love, dance and that sort of thing. What is the latest and greatest that's been going on with you recently? I know, and I want to save what I think is one of the best things for last, and that's the March 19th date. We'll talk about that towards the end here. We'll save that part, that March 19th date, for the end. But talk to us a little bit about the latest and greatest that's been going on with you since we last spoke.
The latest and greatest that has been going on with me. So this year, I am really focused on collaboration and expansion. So one of the things that this year has just really been a little bit of a whirlwind, in the sense that, like, this time last year, I had a few thousand followers, and I've been doing the work that I've been doing, the coaching, the speaking, all of that goodness since like 2013, 2014, something like that. So almost a decade of doing this. And then I was just doing what I do. I just kind of posted a video and walked away from it, like a crock pot, set it and forget it. And I walked away. And then next thing I know, virality became a thing in my life. And so to go in a year from like 14,000 followers to now, I don't know, it's over 140,000 followers at this point. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of exposure, and that's a lot of visibility, and people that I have long admired, in A-list circles, people like Viola Davis, sharing my work, people like Maxwell sharing my work, people like Attorney Benjamin Crump sharing my work. And I'm like, wow, and then I get texts and emails from friends like, girl, you popped up in my Facebook group. And I'm like, did I? So it's about being intentional about that expansion. What all of that has told me is that it's told me two things. One, there's a lot of content on social media. There's just a lot of content in the world, right? There's just a lot. Some of it is beneficial and useful, and some of it is, entertaining and funny. Some of it is noise. And so when what you're doing is able to kind of like punch through that, to punch through the noise and to punch through, the distractions and what have you, it tells me that what I have to say is meaningful and impactful, because people really are trying to figure out how to be their best selves and how to live their best lives and how to resolve the disconnect between the life that they want and the one that they're settling for. And so doing this work and being able to help them resolve that, I'm kind of doubling down on what I've been doing and being really intentional and drawing on my teacher background from a curricular standpoint. It's like, what do I want my students to learn this year? And approaching social media from that perspective. And also being intentional about bringing ways to bring them over to a way that they can connect with me on a regular basis. Because as we all know, we don't own Spotify, we don't own Apple Podcasts, we don't own Anchor, we don't own Instagram, we don't own TikTok. They can change the rules when they get ready. They can change the algorithms when they get ready. They can shut down when they get ready, formerly known as Twitter, right? And so I think I want to be a little bit more intentional about creating a portal for people to come and get content directly from me, just in case these platforms decide to pivot and go in another direction. So that's what I'm working on right now.
When we spoke last, you were on your way to Portugal, and I think you were doing some research. Is it a way for you to talk about some of that? Like what your findings were? Like what was the top three things? I think you were doing something with the expats
Yes.
and what was the two things that you learned that you didn't expect, or two things you expected that you realized that you didn't really anticipate?
So just to recap, I was doing research on Black Americans that had expated to Portugal. Okay. And that was really revelatory and because something that I didn't expect and something that I learned is that expat is a privileged term, and the locals really don't like it because it's almost it's not colonization, but it is this privilege. I have money, I have resources, and I can come into your country and I can buy up your properties and I can live in ways that you can't live because you don't have the means. Okay. And so the average living wage in Portugal is significantly lower, than what it is in the United States, which I know is saying something, because when you look at the US poverty line, it's like, bruh, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
actually is. And so Portugal, when they joined the EU, in order for them to kind of get their money up, okay, so that they could be in proper standing with the other countries in the EU, they created incentives that incentivize foreign money. So foreign people to come in and purchase property and invest in the economy. And it worked. And it worked too well. And so in the same ways that Airbnbs, when you have an influx of Airbnbs in an area, it makes that area unaffordable and inaccessible to the local residents. And so that was something that I didn't anticipate. And then when you think about the word expat, what do we call them in the United States? We call them immigrants, right? It's like, well, we got to do something about immigration. And so a lot of times when people are thinking about that expat life, they don't think of themselves as immigrants because of class and privilege. So that was something that I learned. Something else that I learned is I focused on Black Americans fleeing the United States, and all of them left due to some race related or racism adjacent dynamic. And yet I said, well, Portugal and all of them at some level have experienced some form of discrimination. They didn't use the word racism. They used words like discrimination. They said, well, racism is kind of global and discrimination is everywhere. But the difference is in Portugal, the distinctions are more about class rather than race. And so, for example, one of the countries that was colonized in, the slave trade and what have you is like Angola in Africa, right? And so darker skinned Africans are still treated with a little bit of shade, a little bit of disdain, that sort of thing. But then dark pigmented Americans, as soon as they open their mouths and it's clear that they're American, the script flips and it's like, oh, you got money. Let's have a conversation. It's that sort of thing. And so there are these class distinctions that I learned about over there that I didn't anticipate. And the hard truth is this: there is no place in this world that you can escape racism, discrimination, prejudice, because people do it even when it's not anti-black. Okay, it sometimes um it's within cultures and different groups and for religious reasons and all kinds of things. So there is no escape from discrimination. However, the key thing was all of them said that in the United States, they felt like their lives were in danger. Like, if not imminent danger, eventual danger, because they felt like they were living in a country that the laws did not protect them, and the fix was in, and a lot of the perpetrators were actually in law enforcement, and that there would be no justice for them, and they didn't want to pass on this legacy of running scared to their children and grandchildren. And so over there, they say there's just a sense of peace. One of the most prized things that everyone said since they moved there is they said, I can just be. Nobody's looking at me sideways when I'm walking in the store. When I come to the parks, nobody's, pointing. Like, when I go to restaurants, nobody's rushing me off the table. And so I'm just allowed to be without having to carry the burden and the psychological baggage that comes along from being othered in the United States. So it was really fascinating to learn all of that. And I found it valuable in the sense that a lot of times people think that if I just leave this country, that's my golden ticket. Everything has a cost. Everything has a cost. And even if it's not a direct cost to you, you also have to think about what you're doing to the people in the countries that you're expatting to.
I was just wondering, Portugal, of course, Portuguese. How was the language challenge for the expats to go there? Or I would think they would want to go to a country that spoke English. Like, did they just learn it, or there's a large population of people who speak English?
Listen, so that is generational. So a lot of people, let me say this for people who think that in Portugal they speak Spanish. They do not. They speak Portuguese, okay? And so my favorite, I will give you like my 4 phrases, right, that I know from traveling over there. Good morning, bom dia. No fala português, which means I don't speak Portuguese. Desculpa, I'm sorry. No fala português. I don't speak Portuguese, okay? And so when the younger people, so like the Gen Xers and down, all of them speak English. But when you get into like what we would consider the boomers and older, they like, well, what you want me to do? You over here. You over here. So
you're in my country.
You in my country. So you either gonna figure it out or you're gonna type something in your phone. Like what do you want me to do?
Right. That's hilarious. Yeah. So I have a follow-up to that, to what you shared a moment ago. Weathering. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Weathering, right? In terms of, the impact that waking up every day and having to be concerned about your well-being when you leave your house, waking up every day and wondering, do I look the part? Quick story. Last night I went to a friend's house. We had some friends got together, and it happened coincidentally to be at a white lady's house. And I know her, I've met her before, but we arrived at night. I pulled up. I was the first person to get out of the car. It was dark. And I approached the door, and the look she had on her face was of, I won't say great concern, but concern. And so I look, I'm like, how's it going? And she very hesitantly, kind of waved back. And around that time, the rest of the people got out of the car, my wife and mother and other women. And so her mood just changed immediately. Those small little encounters, where, and all of us could get, well, especially, I think more so guys can think back to people that we know, that we've interacted with, but we see them in a different context, and we might approach them to say hi, and they're kind of like, wait a minute, clutching their purse, and it's me, Andre. Oh, hey, hi. So I could see that peace and calm that might come from living in a place where you can sit down and not have to think about that on a daily basis, where you can just kind of leave the house and not be overly concerned about how am I presenting today? How am I going to be perceived today? So what you shared about your experience and, the interviews and that sort of thing while you're in Portugal, it resonates with me. One question about that, do you have that compiled anywhere in terms of where we can kind of, read up about it, or is this something that's going to be discussed in some forum somewhere or anything like that?
So I have all of the interviews recorded, and so I'm kind of curating that now, right? Because
Okay.
some of the interviews are kind of lengthy, and so you try to truncate them so that they're
Sure.
in like these manageable bites. And I'm presenting a summary actually to my college in a couple of weeks. And so that will kind of be like the first iteration. And once that presentation is kind of pulled together, then I'm happy to share it out. And
Sure.
also so I will say this for anybody who's thinking about, who has one foot out of the country already, who's like, yeah, I'm not going to retire here or what have you. I am enthralled with the idea of having residency in another country because I like options. And I just remember a lot of the people that went, this happened within the past like 4 years. And so when you think about what was happening kind of politically in this country during that time, and then, George Floyd, and then January 6th, they were like, oh, and here was like kind of like the biggest aha, right? So when we think about refugees, okay, so when we think about the war that's happening in Ukraine, so neighborhoods literally being bombed. You think about like the conflict that's happening in Gaza, neighborhoods literally being bombed. That's what we think of when we think refugee, right? Like somebody that's just on the run for their lives, right? But that's how they felt. That is how they felt. And so when we think refugee is like, I left everything and I just packed up my family and we just got the heck out of there, right? Versus these were Black people with means. And I'm not saying like filthy rich, but like, I put it like this. In Portugal, we would be balling, okay? And so for them, they went over there with means, but also with this psychological kind of like terror, kind of like pushing them, right? And so the thought of having another passport, okay, because in residency, if you go through the process, and there's a lot of Facebook groups that will like literally help you, say, hey, here's what we did. We don't gatekeep. This is how you do it. This is how much money you need, and all of that. That is a really appealing option to me, and I'm sure a lot of people, because now here we are on the horizon of another presidential election with the same kind of possibilities at the forefront, and people are like, yeah, I don't know that I can live through that. And so I'm definitely, and I'm not a gatekeeper either. So once I kind of like compile this information, I'm happy to share it out, happy to share links to Facebook groups of people that can help people get the heck out of Dodge. It's almost like Blacksit is a real thing. And people kind of like channeling the spirit of the Harriet Tubmans of the world, like, all right, we gonna put together this railroad. We gonna get you overseas. We gonna figure this thing out.
That's right.
Because that's kind of like where it is, and and I'm just the type of gal, I like options. And so, having a US passport is great, and having a passport to the EU would be also great, because it just gives you a lot of flexibility to move around and pivot when you need to pivot.
Sure. So let's talk about the other side of that coin. So one side is what we kind of laid out here, looking or exploring options outside of the US, right? And the reasons for that. The other side of that coin is for those that are here and not at that point yet or working towards that goal. I know you do a lot of coaching and helping people, make it through. What advice, what suggestions can you provide or share for those that feel like, yeah, I just can't, I feel like I can't move another step forward. I feel like I'm moving through sludge every day. what's something you can share that helps motivate, inspire, and keep the optimism alive, I guess. I don't
Let's
know.
say boost the morale, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really good question, because the truth is being able to again, going back to that privileged term, to be an
Mm.
expat, that is a very privileged process. Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's not in your sight line, and sometimes it's not just because you don't have the money, you have family ties here, or you might have aging parents, or you have, something, right? That anchors you here. I am excuse me, I'm currently reading a book right now, fascinated about this topic. It's called Together by Dr. Vivek Murthy. And Vivek Murthy was the Surgeon General under President Obama, and then he kind of came back and did some work under the Biden administration. And Together is all about the loneliness epidemic in this country, in the United States. A lot of people live in prolonged isolation, and they don't have community. And even people who are married, okay, like I was just watching NPR the other day, there's men experience what they call a friendship recession, where they just don't
Mm.
have friends, okay? Like they just
Mm-hmm.
don't have those communities, or some men say, well, I lost my friends when I got married and they stayed single, and now all of a sudden I couldn't, interact with with my single friends the way I used to, or what have you. And
Mm-hmm.
so between friendship recessions and loneliness epidemics, or what have you, what I tell people, I said, be intentional about finding your tribe. You need some people. So there's a documentary on Netflix right now called Blue Zones. And blue zones
Mm.
are these areas where people have lived beyond 100 years, or what they call them, centenarians. I'm probably saying that
Mm-hmm.
terribly, but people that have lived to be 100 years old plus. And they're like, how are they doing it? What is the key to longevity? One of the biggest keys to that longevity is community, having people in your life that come and see about you, that care about you, you care about them, and you're doing life together. So whether you like, okay, I'm gonna come over on Tuesday and we do gardening, or on Wednesdays we do singing, or on Thursdays we do Bible study, or whatever the thing is, okay, it's like, these are my people. And a lot of us in the United States, which is kind of built on this idea of rugged individualism, right? And I can do it by myself. That is a
Mm-hmm.
very Western and very polarizing idea, because in the rest of the world, they don't roll like that. They're
Mm-hmm.
close cultured, okay? And so what I would tell people is be intentional about finding your tribe. And you can start and do some things like, so there's just like there's dating apps, there's an app called Meetup. And or you can just go on meetup.com or meetup.org, and there are groups in your community that are for writers, are for readers, are for people who like to ice skate, are for people who are trying to learn a certain language, are for people who want to meet and talk about certain television programs. Like, there are interest groups all around the country, all around, the neighborhood. You
Mm-hmm.
can volunteer. Okay, so you can go into senior facilities and connect with seniors who are desperate for company, desperate for engagement. You can go to schools, and you can read to children. But my biggest thing would be connect with people, find a tribe,
Mm-hmm.
find a reason to because we are hardwired for belonging. Okay, we, believe it or not, are tribal people. But
Mm-hmm.
in America, in this Western ideal of by myself, we've been kind of pushed away from that and conditioned
Mm-hmm.
away from that. And I'm telling you, that does not work anywhere in the world. And to share this statistic with you, out of the book, they said that prolonged loneliness and isolation can be as detrimental to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Mm.
It's like, even in the Bible, it says it's not good for man to be alone. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not. And so that is what I would tell people, is that even if being an expat or immigrating to another country is not in the cards for you, being able to be here and surrounded with love and people that you can pour into and that can pour into you is a really healthy alternative.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I'm Pastor Smiley here. I was talking to a buddy of mine recently, and he used that exact term, pouring into. He was talking about how he's been more intentional about finding friend groups for the reasons you just stated, right? Because he said he's found that it's hard for him to pour into his family because he feels like he's tapped dry for the reasons we laid out earlier. And so having these friend groups allows him to get filled up with, the camaraderie and support and love that, you get from being around friends. I know that I read somewhere that women generally live longer because partially because they're healthier, but more importantly because of the number of friends they have compared to the number of friends most guys have, and how that impacts your health positively. So with that in mind, Smiley, I'm going to invite you over for some gardening on Wednesday. I'm going to start a Wednesday gardening club, and we can sing and garden. So we're going to
better sing and garden. Listen, bringing in the sheaves, okay? Whatever. But I want to touch in on that, right? Like how I've seen that manifest in real life. So I grew up in a Baptist church, and something that always fascinated me, and I didn't understand it fully until I got older, was, you have deacons and mothers boards and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
When a deacon died, his wife did not get married. She was like, hey, I served my time. I put in my bid. I'm good. I'm hanging out with Diane, and I'm going on my cruise ship, and I got my friends, and I'm good. And she just went on in Jesus' name. Okay. She just went on about her business. All right. But the man, when one of the mothers died or the deaconesses died, he immediately went on the hunt for another woman. He was like, oh, I can't do this by myself business. Like that was couldn't be alone. That was like a top priority for him. And I was like, that is really part and parcel to what you're saying, is that women, and think about the way that women are socialized versus how men are socialized, right? Women are socialized into tribalism. When bad things happen or women are facing an issue, we going into the group chat, we going into the sister circle, and girl, and all of a sudden what you want us to do, girl? We'll pull our head back. Like, okay, what's the address? My earrings out, that sort of thing. Or, we'll bring over the wine bottle and the tissues, and it's like, girl, we got you. Okay. But then for guys, it's like, come on, man. It's like, suck it up, man. Shake it off, man. Like that sort of thing. So men don't get that nurturing and that comfort in the same way that women have been socialized to lean into that and be vulnerable in those places. So I'm just to confirm that absolutely does play out in real life.
But you know what? I'm so glad you called it that way or described it that way, because the way I met Dre was through a virtual push-up session. And we were only doing 100 push-ups, but and sometimes we got up to like 13 or 10 to 13 people, dudes, doing these push-ups. It would take us 3 hours to do 100 push-ups, because that was like our social excuse to get together and talk about dude stuff. Because why would it take us that long to do 100 push-ups? But that's when we were talking about each other's day. Everyone had whatever was on their mind. It takes that long
because push-ups are hard. Okay, like it would take me that long.
That's right.
That was our communion. That was a way for us to bond. Yeah. So, but I like the way you tied I want to go back to the expat. One more time is, I saw a TikTok and it basically said exactly what you said. It said, when Americans go over there, we're expats, but when other people come here, they're refugees or immigrants. Are Americans ever considered refugees? Like, or is that just a foreign, like, if someone goes to Venezuela, or let's say they go to England, and it's like, oh, I had to get out of the US. We would never call ourselves refugees. That's a part of the classism and elitism you're talking about, just in that one word alone. That's because can Americans be refugees? I guess that's the question.
So That's a great question.
Yeah, it is.
It really comes down to privilege, right? So America is known as, right, the land of milk and honey. It's known as the richest nation in the world. Why are people breaking down borders to, to get over here? Because the American dream, the American way, right? So that is our global reputation, right? And yet, I would probably say it depends on who you are in America. I think if you are black, brown, and poor, yeah, you can play that card, and even in that, a black, brown, and poor person that has either been educated in this country, or has experienced, like, case in point. So here's one of the big, oh, this is one of the big things. So Portugal used to be a socialist, a communist country. It was under a dictatorship. And they have only come away from that in the past 60, 70 years. And so a lot of the bureaucracy, a lot of the infrastructure is very different. And so, for example, a very American concept is like, let's say you go to the bank and there's an issue or you don't like the way you're being treated. It is very American to say, can I speak to the manager? Or, like, hey, there's a protocol. I can call somebody who's in charge, who's a supervisor, and this person is going to help me, or they're going to hear, I'm going to air my grievances or what have you. That is very American. You go to other countries, they don't have to hear you. They don't have to do anything for you. And so the thing is that, can you be a refugee from the perspective of psychological terror? Can you be a refugee from a place of feeling like your life is in danger? Can you be a refugee from like, hey, I got $8 in my pocket? Yes, but are you still going over there with these very American and privileged sensibilities, and in some cases, this subtle entitlement because you think that things are supposed to go a certain way because that's how they go in America? It takes some time to unlearn that. It takes some time to unlearn that and really humble yourself and engage in the culture. So, for example, the reason why a lot of European speaking nations speak English is not because of us. It's because of our colonizer cousins in the UK. It's because of them. They speak English. And so because they over there are like the American equivalent, right? They're the ones that have money and power. And so when they vacation and what have you, English is considered the language of money. Okay. So when you're going to a different country, okay, if people are still able to engage with you in your native language from America, because that is known as the language of money. So there's elements of privilege that you just can't divorce yourself from, is what I'm trying to say.
But the one thing, if I could summarize, is it seems like even if a black person, you said or a person of color, black, brown color, goes to, say, Portugal or one of these other countries with their American mindset, their American training, even if they don't have a lot of money, they still carry with them that entitlement and that privilege that gives them a better life because they're not in fear of getting shot when they walk down the street or getting arrested or incarcerated. They have other things to deal with, which is discrimination, but it's not life-threatening discrimination.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's a fair, accurate summary.
Wow, this is a fascinating journey. I can't wait to read it. And the last one before we move into maybe the final four is, or actually Dre mentioned a date. Before we move into that is, why Portugal? Why not Ghana? I hear a lot of people doing expats to Ghana, expat to Uganda, expats to Kenya. Just what was the intrigue about Portugal?
So for me personally, I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to certain art history and the historicity. So the thing about the United States is that as a country, it's very young. It's very young. The US is a baby, compared to Europe. Okay. And I'm fascinated with the history of Europe, the architecture of Europe, the third spaces in Europe. So third spaces is something that I love about Europe and the UK. But third spaces are those places that are outside of home, outside of work. It's a third space that you can go and gather. And in the United States, you have to pay for third spaces. So like, hey, can we meet up for drinks? Yeah, you can meet up for drinks, but you got to pay for the drinks. It's like, hey, can we have lunch, and just hang out? Yeah, you can, but you got to pay for that, or if we have parks and trails, but that depends on where you live. Okay. So if you don't live in one of those areas that can afford to invest in nice parks and recreation and that sort of thing for people to just hang and gather. And then because we live in the United States, depending on who you are, if too many of you are hanging and gathering, then it's like, all right, what's going on here? Everybody all right? You're being kind of like policed and scrutinized and what have you. It's not like that in Europe. In Europe, there's like these open courtyard spaces and and plazas, and people are just encouraged to just hang and just be and just chill and just engage. And so even the way that Europe is set up, it's set up for people to gather, as opposed to the United States, it's set up for people to disperse. And so I love that aspect of it. And Portugal is, because it doesn't have the name brand jeans, it's not the Jabot jeans of Europe, like Italy or Spain or Greece. It comes with a much lower price tag. As I said, Portugal has incentivized people to come and seek residency there. And so they have even though it's a socialist country, if you come there on what they call the D7 visa, as of now, if you come and pursue residency, you don't have to pay taxes in that country for 10 years. And so, and because I'm an educator, I will never pay taxes there because I have my job was one that served the public. And so for me personally, I have a lot of financial incentive to go to Portugal because of the incentives that they have to encourage people to live there. And plus, if you've ever been to Europe, you know that getting over there, it might cost you a pretty penny, but once you're over there, it's pretty cheap to move around. I mean, you can hop to Italy, you can hop to Spain, you can hop to, at a fraction of the cost. And so Portugal for me was just kind of like a nice hub to be able to pivot to other parts of Europe and Africa for that matter, to go there. Ghana, I've heard wonderful things. I still plan to visit one day, and it's still on the short list. But for me, it just has to make sense financially. It has to make sense in terms of infrastructure and that sort of thing. Case in point, I have a good friend. Her and her husband, they left Maryland, and now they live in Playa del Carmen. They live in Mexico. And I mean, the weather is beautiful, the food is good, all that good stuff. But in Mexico, you can't drink the water out of the faucet. And that's one of those infrastructure things where I'm like, yeah, that's a deal breaker for me. And they said, well, do you drink water out of your sink at home? I said, no, but it's just something about that, something about not being able to, like, if I had to drink water from the tap at home, I'm all good in the hood. If I drink a glass of water, in some places in Mexico, straight out of the tap, I'm going to be hospitalized. So it's things like that, that give me pause about going to certain countries. So because I've never been to Ghana, I don't want to speak out of turn. So it's just about educating myself better so that I can make an informed decision. But Portugal, for me, it was financially a better fit for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to live.
And when it comes down to, right, that's ultimately what it depends on. What's the best fit for you, right? I remember when I went to college, all my buddies were studying business. Like, oh, yeah, I'll go into business too. And, I hated it. Dr. Shanté, I hated every initial class. And then I took a communications class as an elective. I was like, oh, this is it. Where have you been all my life? So I changed my major with the quickness. So the best fit, in Portugal, for many might be the best fit. My sister is actually moving to Ghana this summer. So for her, that's the best fit. So that's kind of what it comes down to. So I'm going to try using I'm going to set you up for this announcement you have regarding March 19th. And so here's a little setup intro here. Give me 1 second. It's not playing. Oh, wait. Is it playing? It's not playing. So this didn't work. Oh, we should have. Wait. Let's try this. All right, Dr. Shanté, what's happening March 19th that you want to share with all of our listeners?
March 19th, I will be having my third child. I will be birthing another podcast into the world. And this one I am launching straight to YouTube. It was designed and it's created for a viewing audience. And it is called Hole in Your Heart Podcast, Hole with a W. And Hole in Your Heart uses a trauma informed care approach to helping people find wholeness and happiness in their lives and in their relationships. And this is an extension of the work that I do on Instagram, on social media and TikTok and what have you. Because even though TikTok gives you longer form content, like so you can record longer videos on TikTok, Instagram, it it's kind of like this 90-second. And even though you can post longer videos, the real format just really doesn't lend itself. The social media format just really doesn't lend itself to unpack some of these very weighty topics. And so you're trying to pack as much information as you can into like this 90-second piece. And then there's always follow-up questions. It's like, well, where's the rest of the conversation? Or how do I do that? Or what are the steps? Or where do we go from here? And so Hole in Your Heart is really the follow-up to a lot of the questions that I get asked on social media so that we can really unpack these issues and give people tangible tools to be their best selves and live their best lives.
I like it. I like it. One question, how did you come up with the name?
Because I'm a bad chick. No,
Hello.
That's really the crux of who I am and what I do is like, what do you help people do? Find wholeness, find wholeness after the break, right? And so I'm writing a book by the same name. And so from a branding perspective, that's really smart, to kind of like build the audience so that when you launch the book and that gets released of the same name, then there's some continuity there. But yeah, that's my whole goal in what I do in my platform is helping people find the wholeness in their heart because there's a lot of broken pieces and there's a lot of fragmentation, but we can put it back together. We can put it back together so that people can live whole lives.
No, I like that. I'm eager to watch it. I love YouTube podcasts and YouTube videos. And as we move into the new Final Four, tell me, what out of all the things you've been doing, especially with going from 1,000 followers to 140,000 followers to studying abroad and different things, what is your biggest risk? The biggest risk you've ever taken?
The biggest risk, I would probably say putting myself out for public consumption. People don't fully appreciate how vulnerable you and brave you have to be because we live in a world where I broke my ankle, run into the comments, because if you have one hair out of place, or like I had somebody tell me, they said, I love you so much. Can you please buckle your Apple Watch? Because like sometimes, I just throw the Apple Watch on and it's kind of like hanging out like this. But they were like, I love you so much, but can you please buckle your Apple Watch? And I'm thinking to myself, now here I am talking about trauma, relationships, love,
Right.
and your eye catches something as minor and minuscule as that, right? And so putting yourself out for public consumption, is a big deal. And I have a full-time job. What I do on social media is teaching, but it's not what I get paid to do, and so and it's nothing that I'm hiding. It's kind of like hiding in plain sight type of thing, but sometimes people can feel a type of way, when it's like, oh, what are you doing? And what is this about? And it's like, what do you do in your free time, Diane? What do you do when you're off the clock, Kirk? Like, what are we talking about here? And so it's putting myself out for public consumption. And the thing is, sometimes we think that we have to be perfect, right? And we have to be circumspect and we have to have it all together. And I have never subscribed to that. What I do is a calling. It's something that, because it takes a lot of work to be a content creator and to do it consistently. People start things, but then they fall off. It takes a lot, and I wouldn't do this if I didn't feel this calling in my heart to do it. And so it takes faith to obey, and I did it when there was one follower, right? I did it when nobody was showing up. I did it when there was no money on the table. I continued to do it because I'm like, this is what I've been called to do. And that is brave work. And I'm very proud of that. That is, it's, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I've leaned into it, and I've been fortunate to have come out on a side of it where people are really responding to it and positively, and I can positively impact their lives in that way.
Just a follow-up to that is earlier in the podcast, you mentioned that Maxwell and some other A-listers listen to what is that one, who is that one podcaster that listened to your podcast? You're like, oh my God, I'm just so excited. Like if Gabriel Union said, we're listening to Dre and Smiley, I'm like, oh my God, Gabriel Union, we made it. So who is that one A-lister that reached out to you that just had you shaking with chills or just making you feel like, wow. Was it Obama? Was it Michelle? Oh, Viola, yeah.
Viola Davis.
What?
Viola Davis took one of my videos and she shared it on her page, and I was shooketh. First of all, I love Viola Davis. She's my favorite actress.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to like your stuff. It's even one thing to share it in the stories. But for her to have taken the time to have given me real estate on her main feed.
Wow. Wow. What about you? Wow.
I said that's it right there. Like this all over but the shouting at this point. That was a big deal. And I was just very grateful for that. So grateful for that.
Amazing. You've done a lot. You're accomplished in my eyes, I'm sure in the eyes of many. You help a lot of people in terms of, the advice and things you share with them. What's one piece of great advice that you receive?
Hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard.
Ooh.
And, it's one of those things where I know so many people who are talented, who have gifts, but they're not doing the work. They're not consistent. They're not committed. And a lot of the people that you see make it in this world, it's not because they have the silver spoon in their mouths, and, it's not because, daddy's got a trust fund and that sort of thing. It is because they put their feet to the pavement and just kept going. I've had people tell me all the time, Shanté, consistency is your superpower. Like you just keep going. Like you are relentless. I say, yeah, that's what it takes. It's a steady drumbeat. It's keep going. When on my first podcast, I had a football player from the Chicago Bears on the show. His name was Israel Adonijah. And I love the phrase that he used. He said, keep swinging the axe. He said, just keep swinging the axe, because on the road to life, sometimes you are going to come across a felled tree, right? Like, so now there's this big old tree in your path. He said, and you could sit there complaining about it like, oh my God, I'm already running late. Like, dang, who put this here? And, where's management or what? And none of that is going to move the tree out of the way. So just keep swinging the axe. That's what's going to get the tree down. Just keep swinging the axe. That's that hard work. And that beats talent, because sitting up there talking about it, griping about, none of that is going to get you any closer to where you need to be. And so keep swinging the axe is some of the best advice that I've gotten, which is correlated to that. Just hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard.
What is something that never fails to make you laugh?
Something that never fails to make me laugh. So do I want to say this out loud? Far be it from me to laugh at the misfortune of others, right? But in every year around this time, so like December, January, February, on TikTok, there are these videos of people in Seattle and people in Portland where there's been like an ice storm and like the entire city is iced over. And watching these people struggle on this ice, it gets me every time. I mean, and it's just like a sitcom. I mean, whole car, your brakes ain't doing nothing out there.
Nothing.
I mean, and it's just boom, boom, just nothing you can do, right?
Car after car
after car, and people feel. And what's funny is the people who are filming it from the warmth and safety of their homes, they just out the window like, look at them, you know. People who step out the car and they just holding on to trying to guys unchanging hands, trying to just make it to the porch. I mean,
right.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It never ceases to make me laugh.
Okay. If you were stuck on an island, deserted island, who's the one person you would want to have on that island with you?
If I was stuck on an island, who's the one person I would want to have stuck on the island with me? Okay, I'm dating myself a little bit. I hope you all know who this is. MacGyver.
Heck yeah.
MacGyver. Yeah. I don't know what this new generation knows about MacGyver or what have you, but MacGyver was that dude that could take like some sandy rocks, a bubblegum wrapper, you know, some seawater and make a jet propelled, you know, like we getting out of it. So if I'm stuck on a desert island, I want MacGyver or somebody with MacGyver's skill set because I know we ain't gonna be there long.
Okay, I love it.
Dr. Shanté, this has been fascinating as usual. I just love to listen to you speak. I can't wait to read your words. So thank you for everything and thanks for coming back to the pod.
It's always so much fun. You guys are a riot, and I appreciate the invitation. I really do.
Yeah. Hey, good luck to you on this new podcast and everything else you're doing. I love, and I promise you, I'm not stalking you. I just enjoy watching your content.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm sure when you see these messages from me on Instagram, you're like, is he liking my stuff again? I'm not stalking it. I
appreciate the support. You know, I really do appreciate the support. You know, it's like they say, you could be anywhere else in the world, you know, and you're watching my stuff. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
All right.